Hello and welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into a really mind-bending concept from the Nyaya Vaisheshika school of Indian philosophy. This gets right to the very heart of how we even make sense of the world. It's all about the hidden glue that kind of holds our reality together. Okay, so let's jump right into this with a question that seems simple, but it's actually incredibly deep. How do we see sameness in a world that is just filled with unique, different things? Really think about it for a second. You can see a tiny little brown cow and a huge black and white spotted cow. And your mind instantly just applies one single idea to both of them, cowness. Or you see a simple wooden stool and this incredibly ornate throne, and you get that they both share this quality of chairness. How in the world does our brain do that? It's an incredible trick, isn't it? Well, the answer, according to these ancient philosophers, is a concept called Samanya, or the universal. It's this invisible shared property that different things have, which lets our minds group them all together under one idea. You could say it's the very reason we can think and talk in categories at all. Now, here's where it gets really, really interesting. They didn't just stop there and say, okay, universals exist. They realized that not all universals are created equal, so they actually broke them down into two fundamental types. So it all comes down to these two types. On one side, you've got the para, or higher universal. Think of this as the biggest, most enormous category possible. And on the other, you have apara, or lower universals, and these create much smaller, more specific groups. Now the key difference is what they do. A lower universal, like cowness, does two things. It unites all cows, sure, but it also differentiates them from, say, horses. But a higher universal, it only unifies. That's its only job. And these lower or apara universals create this beautiful nested hierarchy. It's almost like a folder system for reality itself. You can start really broad with something like substanceness, right? Then you can click into that and get more specific with earthness, then clayness, and go all the way down to the very specific universal of potness. It's this incredibly systematic way of carving up the world into concepts we can actually understand. Okay, so if you follow that hierarchy all the way to the top, what's the ultimate category? The one folder that contains absolutely everything? Well, the answer is that single all-encompassing higher universal, which they call Sata. Sata is the universal of existence itself. Simple as that. It is the one single property that unites every single thing that is. A rock, the color blue, the act of jumping, and it separates all of that from everything that is not, like, the classic philosophy example, a rabbit's horn. And this is exactly why it's a para or higher universal. See, unlike cowness, which creates this exclusive club just for cows, existence is the one property that includes everything. Its only job is to give us that uniform idea of is. It doesn't draw lines between things, it erases them, grouping all of reality into one single massive set. But as you can probably guess, this idea didn't just sail through unchallenged. Proposing some invisible property of existence? Yeah, that was pretty controversial, and it sparked a truly brilliant philosophical debate. So the skeptics step up with a very common-sense objection. They basically said, hold on a second. A pot's existence is just the pot itself. A rock's existence is the rock. Why are you guys inventing this whole extra metaphysical layer called Sata? Their argument is kind of like a philosopher's version of Occam's razor. Let's not make things more complicated than they need to be. If the individual objects themselves are enough to explain reality, why add this abstract concept on top of everything? But here's the powerful counterpunch. The people who believed in Samanya argued that the very uniqueness of things is what makes the universal necessary. Think about it. If a pot's nature is completely different from a cloth's nature, then their individual natures can't be the source of the single shared idea of is that we apply to both of them. That uniform idea has to come from a uniform source. So the objectors didn't give up. They pivoted. They came back with a new angle, suggesting that existence isn't some property in things, but it's more like a label we put on things that we can prove are real. So something is if we can perceive it or have evidence for it. Makes sense, right? Well, this argument actually falls apart pretty quickly. As the rebuttal shows, it creates these impossible logical loops. First, it's totally circular. You can't define existence by proof if proof itself needs an existing thing to be proven.
And second, it leads to an infinite regress. If every proof needs its own proof of existence, well, you'd never actually prove anything. You'd just be proving proofs forever. So, the theory of Samanya stands, but it leaves us with this really fascinating question. If these universals are real properties of the world around us, why aren't they all just equally obvious? Well, the philosophers made a distinction between manifest or obvious universals and unmanifest or subtle ones. Some, like the cowness between two cows, are super obvious because the objects share so many common features. But others, like the substanceness that a giant mountain and a tiny little mustard seed share, that's a lot more subtle. The perception is delayed because there are just so few common things for our minds to grab onto. And this is where the whole idea gets really practical and cool. It shows that perception isn't just about using your eyes. It's about what your mind is prepared to see. A gem expert sees the universal of valuable gem, where an untrained person just sees a shiny rock, because their knowledge unlocks that perception. In the same way, a property like a person's family lineage isn't physically visible, but it's considered real, and it's perceived only through knowledge of their background. And this leads to such a profound takeaway. Reality has layers. The limits of our own personal perception are not the limits of reality. Some truths, some patterns, some universals are only accessible to those who have actually cultivated the knowledge to see them. So this ancient idea leaves us with a really powerful modern question. In your own life, in your career, your hobbies, your relationships, what are the subtle patterns, those unmanifest universals that you might be missing? What truths are hiding in plain sight, just waiting for a prepared mind to perceive them? Thanks for joining us.